You?
Yeah, yourself.
Yeah, very good. It's a new year. It's a new life. It was a song somewhere. I don't know. Never mind.
Yeah. I've had a look at the Oxford Farming Conference thing. I've always thought about going, but I've never done it. So, see if you pay your 20 quid, do you get to go to multiple sessions?
Yeah. It's like it started today, and then it's tomorrow and the next day as well. So
Right. Yeah.
you can sort of pick and choose. There's a whole program you can go through that. So
I've been looking at it. How come the ones that you want to go to always double up and they're on at the same time?
you know what? It was the same thing. It was the same thing when you actually go there in person. I've been there 3 times, and it was always like that. You sort of you don't know where to go.
Do they record the sessions? Can you go in and listen to sessions
Yes.
that you missed?
If you go on their YouTube channel, you'll find everything from the past years.
Right. Okay.
And
So,
the
yeah.
interesting bit is that if you go on their YouTube channel, their most watched video of all time is Dr. Ingham's presentation from 2015.
Okay. Right.
And
Yeah.
it beats everything by a massive amount.
Right. Yeah.
Like they've got up to say 5,000 views on other videos, and she's got over 200,000 views on hers.
Wow, that's quite impressive.
So I'm curious, what's it going to be? I'm trying to send the word out that we're having this chat, because I'm hoping that we can sort of really push it a bit, because we're also going to have Glyn with us.
I see that, yeah.
And he's going to be talking about his carbon stuff. So we had a chat the other day, and he's taking steps because the banks have fulfilled their promise. They're actually the first payment came through. He's got a couple of more farms that he's going to be guiding this year, and then he says that about March time he's most likely going to tell us if he's got some more stuff coming our way, some more farms interested. But it's going to be interesting, because it's going to be a case of farmers getting paid at the beginning of the process, not towards the end of the process.
So is that like before they actually undertake expenditure?
Kind of. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work, because he would need to explain that. Maybe he will. I don't think he's going to explain everything tomorrow. But
yeah, I take it that's in England. It won't apply in Scotland.
I don't know, because he's in Jersey and he's trying to expand, across.
Mm-hmm.
So he's in Jersey. He's not even in England.
Yeah. Well, Jersey's part of England, isn't it? I mean, I know it's separate. But
it's got its own government.
Does it have its own agri policies and stuff? Does it?
Yeah, so it's got its own government. Everything is slightly separate. So.
Right. Okay. Like the Isle of Man.
Yes, all of these Channel Islands, basically, they've got their own government. So.
If he's bringing like more farms on board for you, that means more work for you. Where do you find your lab technicians to do it? Do they have to do the Elaine Ingham thing? I mean, how do you do the training?
Yeah, they have to go. They have to go through the whole training. They have to do the microscopy certification. And what we're also working on is a British standard, so that potentially in the future you might end up not even going through Dr. Ingham's training, but if you're in the UK, you'll be able just to use the British standard.
Doing a parallel alternative sort of thing.
I don't know. It's British standard is required in the UK to operate. So basically, we have to do it anyway. I'm just basically thinking what's going to be the side effects of that kind of thing. So, but in the end, in the meantime, basically, it's all going to be connected to Dr. Ingham's school, because his carbon code is requiring the soil fluid measurement. And the only reliable method that we really know of is a microscopy. And we've looked at everything else, and it's just not correlating at all. And nobody's done the actual measurements using PLFAs or something else, to have their own tables of interpretation. So we can just basically rely on this for now.
So given the sort of massive increase of interest in all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've presumably got to have plans to fairly massively increase your capacity.
Well, I don't know,
Some of that demand.
I don't know how miracles work, so, I always, take developments like this, with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
I never,
it's an opportunity, a good opportunity that comes your way. You want to be able to access some of it. I mean, I quite accept you're not going to be able to, do the work for the whole country, but you want to be able to make the best of it, don't you?
Well, there's our lab, and then there's people across the country who are already taking Dr. Ingham's courses, and we try to keep in touch with all of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so,
I've been tempted, and I can't decide whether I should buckle down and bloody well do it.
Did you say you've got a microscope, Judith?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I haven't used one since I was in first, maybe second year at uni in the 1980s.
Uh-huh.
But I would be interested.
I was just a wee lad back then.
Well, I was a wee lassie too. Our son's girlfriend, we've got two sons, one on the farm and one not, but the son on the farm has a girlfriend who works, you maybe don't know, Morden Research Institute, which is the farm livestock research place just outside Edinburgh.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Lindsay could teach me how to use it, basically, get that sorted. But I have looked at registering and all the rest of it, but I do 2 days a week looking after my dad. I'm part of his care team, and that actually takes out quite a lot of your week. And it's time that I would never get back. If I was to say, "Oh, I'm not doing it," well, I wouldn't say I'm not doing it.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you don't want to be, risking things now, just wait maybe a couple of months to see how this develops. Because basically, once we know more in terms of how Glyn's side of things develops, then we'll be able to judge how much work there really is. Because at the moment, it's really just dependent on the goodwill of farmers, being interested in this whole concept. Whilst if there's going to be an incentive based on that soil carbon, then obviously more farmers would be flocking towards it. Hi, Doug.
Hi, how you doing?
Very well. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
And to you, yes.
So just to finish off, I would just say, let's see sort of how this develops. And once we know more, then and we know that sort of okay, well, yes, there's actually going to be an influx of work. Then everybody's going to know about this, obviously through this group. So you'll be able to make the call better. Hi, Andrew. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Good afternoon. I've disappeared there. Not so bad, thank you. I looked in washing potatoes and changing pig batches and applying myself to solve problems at the present moment. That and the joys of a couple of inspections next week that are demanding I do lots of paperwork.
Nice. What sort of inspections have you got?
I've got a quarterly pig inspection and an assured combinable crop inspection. So my idiot tolerance is going to get seriously tested next week, isn't it?
How many inspections do you have to go through? That's the thing. It's like so many things, that you.
There's eight pig inspections a year, assured crops, assured produce, and 2 other top-up ones for potato customers.
Do you know one thing? This is another thing. I don't know if you've seen. I've posted this on Twitter. I've made this little video for my investment thing. This one video saying, sort of thank you to farmers that we don't have to be farmers kind of thing, because the farmers do everything and we can be doctors and YouTubers.
Yeah.
And
YouTubers seems to be the careers at the present moment.
Yeah, I know, right? What are we doing here, by the way? Oh, this is going on YouTube. We'll be all rich.
Okay,
so,
cool.
So the thing is, it's like people really have no clue. It's like, I actually titled this video as a toast to the 1%, because there's less than 1% of the population is in direct production of food in this country.
Mm-hmm.
and everybody else doesn't have to bother with it, and nobody has a bloody clue of, you know, how much really oversight and work goes into, you know, everything, you know, beyond just the fact of growing the food.
No, they don't even connect things like chips are made from potatoes and milk comes from cows. It's the ignorance is absolutely staggering. Even as a governor of our small village school a few years ago, I could not believe some of the things that you hear outside school waiting to pick kids up and things like that.
Well,
it's phenomenal. That's just the parents.
Yeah, completely removed from reality of what we do and how we live our lives. Not a clue. Yeah, absolutely useless. But I think we now need to re-educate them and actually get them to understand. We need to. Jeremy Clarkson's made a fairly good start in his own way, on his own sweet way, you know. But I think we do need to tell folk that we're not that hopeless. We're not that backward. We do use a lot of science. We do, you know, we do have checks and balances to fulfill. We do have rules and regulations to fill. We're not completely gung ho. We don't actually make that much money, you know.
No, and I think there's sort of the public views farmers as two different types. There's either the leaning on the gate, chewing a bit of straw, aka 1933.
Yeah,
either that, or we're just flooding the countryside with pesticides, and there doesn't seem to be anything in between. It's the lack of dot joining. It's a little bit frustrating, and as farmers, we're quite easy targets because of the amount of land that we essentially have control of.
75% of all of the UK is in farming, and this is actually the largest percentage of all of Europe, for instance. So yeah, it's, you know, everybody's sort of like, you know, right out there, very easy target.
No, it's that your approach with that video is a good one to try and dispel some of this and educate people. It's whether it'll ring a few bells in people's head and make them realise that it doesn't all come from supermarket by magic. You know, some fairies put it on shelves, don't they? And it just magically appears there.
The likes of in Scotland, they think that, I mean, farmers own vast tracts of land, and they talk about people owning 20,000 hectares. Well, let's be honest, what does that 20,000 hectares produce? It's not that damn much.
Gross
no, it's not.
You know, and they have no idea what the upkeep and maintenance of these estates is. And these big estates up north, we don't have so many of them here, although we do have some. But I mean, they were all built by families that had, you know, interests abroad or huge industrial interests. And it takes a darn lot of money outside of farming to keep that thing going. And you get this politics of envy where people think you're rich because you own land. Nowadays, the two just don't go hand in hand. It doesn't work.
No, they don't. And an airline buying lots of that land doesn't suddenly become carbon neutral, because that farm was already sequestering carbon before the airline bought it. The airline is still chucking emissions out after they bought it.
Yeah,
it's criminal. This carbon offsetting nonsense. It's the biggest scam that would ever exist.
Have you got examples? Have you seen examples actually of airlines buying land to do that?
There's in Scotland there are. And there's actually on the Scottish Farmer last week or the week before, there's stuff about how multinationals in all sorts of parts of industry are buying up huge tracts of land to plant. And there's going to be quite a kickback because some of the land they're buying to plant is actually quite productive upland land and quite.
What, they want to plant trees or something?
Yeah, stuff that they're talking about planting trees on. And if the government allows them to do it in the race that there is at the moment, they could find themselves short on land to produce food. And that land could produce as much or sequester as much carbon in well-managed agricultural systems as it ever would in woodland. So they're going to have to be really careful. And there is starting to be a bit of a shout about it.
Maybe we should do a video together, you know, maybe we should actually organize ourselves. Like, let's say within this group, and then basically say, you know, we could actually combine all of these voices like coming from farmers and says like, we know exactly what to do to sequester carbon. There are now sort of, these things to do it, and we can do it whilst producing food, and start educating this sort of London lot who has no bloody clue, and they just read The Guardian and they just think that we have to stop eating meat and stop flying. And I think we can do everything.
Yeah, somebody needs to do something, because we're going to end, if they allow the thousands of hectares in Scotland that are being purchased at ridiculous prices that farmers couldn't even dream of, you could end up, I think the planning system could end up allowing far too much land in the wrong places.
That's interesting. I also saw somebody posted on.
It must be the same in other parts of England, in the sort of upland areas, Northumberland, the Pennines, Wales. It must be the same in other parts. I'm sure the same thing's happening.
Well, there's the do-gooders as well, because you've got Ed Sheeran now basically posting on social media that he's buying up as much land as he can to rewild. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, we'll do that, but why don't you just plant some fruit trees at least, for God's sake,
He's no idea what rewilding is, or what he's going to achieve by doing that. He's just been told it's the right thing to do.
And rewilding, abandoning it, to me, that's rewilding it. There's no way to be doing any good whatsoever.
No.
At this day and age, we can manage it to sequester and use up an awful lot more carbon dioxide proactively, and still produce food, and still do the sequestration, and still support biodiversity and wildlife.
But the other thing that exacerbates this trend also is the fact that there's now examples in England, in south of England, where land is really, really expensive. Like the Nepex estate or something, where basically they've gone to rewilding, and it just pays them, because they just still get paid per hectare of land. They don't have to put any inputs under the land. They don't produce anything, and they suddenly are profitable because they've got a park which.
Was that going to change with the new system in England?
Say again, please.
Is that not going to change with the new system in England?
I don't know.
It's been the case up to now, but I mean, I'm not quite sure even what's happening in Scotland, to be honest. But England, I think just by owning or managing land, you're not going to get paid. It's going to be the environmental management action stuff that gets you money rather than.
Well, I wonder how it's going to be, because there's a lot of huge landowners who most likely know some friends in London, and I don't know if those payments are just going to magically go away. I think they're just going to be hidden in some other in some other way, and the people with lots of lands are still going to get money for owning that land.
A lot of the future direction seems to be focusing towards the massive farms for whatever reason, because you can't justify some of the things that they're talking about at a smaller scale. What's a bit ironic to me is that a lot of these do-gooders saying, "Oh, rewilding, that's the answer." And they're basically creating monoculture of trees. That's all they're growing, trees. Which, to me, it's just arable crop, similar to an arable crop. There's one crop from one side of the farm to the other. Are you continuous waiting olderness, or are you complete trees in Suffolk on Ed Sheeran's patch?
I'm just basically
technically monoculture, which seems absolutely crazy to me.
I'm just basically interested. Hi, Richard. I'm just basically interested in in rewilding, in the sense that as long as they bring in wild boar, bison, and wolves, back to that mix, then basically, yeah, sure, why not? Because but make it managed as well, and put it onto some shop shelves as well, because then it makes sense, because you've got a productive place. You don't have to do too much, and you still got a productive land. But I think it still needs to be all well calculated. I think it's just. It would be nice basically to have a wild Great Britain where we can just spend time in the wilderness and be happy about it. But I think the government is going to pick up at some point on the fact that that there's less and less of food security in this country, and they're going to reverse all this stuff, and they're going to say, start putting more fertilizer on and stop fooling yourself. So. That's how I see it. Maybe it's not going to be immediate, but it's going to happen in the next 5 years.
I think people need to have a shortage of food and be hungry before they'll start and recognise where it comes from.
They still think, you know, that we're just gonna, you know, keep shipping stuff from, you know, wheat from Ukraine and then oranges from Morocco, and it's gonna be all fine.
Yeah, the ignorance is staggering. All this importing stuff, it's assuming that another country has a surplus to export for us to import.
Yeah, there's a real fine balance, is there not, between being a wee bit hungry and realizing you need to do something about, and then actually, what was it they said in the news the other night? If you miss 7 meals, that's when you get civil disruption.
All right.
It's not much.
I can count to 7.
Yeah, that.
Some of us could do with losing 7 meals.
Okay.
So some of us are maybe carrying 7 meals too many.
Well, definitely after this Christmas, I can tell you that.
Absolutely.
Glyn is demonstrating the 7 meals forward.
First cup of tea all day, Daniel. Don't mock it.
Of course.
First meal all day.
And lots of cycling. And
Been
lots
a long
of
one.
cycling.
Been a long one. Yeah, just got in. How is everyone?
Well, thank you, yourself.
Very good. Yeah, full on with the Oxford Reel today. So
Where have
don't know
you
if
been
anyone
to?
else has joined in on it.
You'll be full of wisdom today, then.
I don't know about that. Yeah, all measurements and things today. So that was interesting. With the Sustainable Food Alliance, I think. Patrick Holden. Do you follow him much, Daniel?
Not lately, no.
Yeah,
What
it's
is
all
he up
very
to?
interesting to see what's happening. Nothing hugely changing, to be honest. Not massive changes, but there's a lot of measurements going from the, from the farmer production level up. But nothing really from, from the start of it all, the soil, which is interesting. Still, no one's talking about where it all begins.
Yes. It's, yes. It's a recurring theme. We'll see how it all goes. And Phil says hi to everyone. He hasn't got a microphone, so he's going to be just listening in. So hi, Phil. Good to see you here. Cool. Anything interesting happening for you this spring, by the way? Anybody's got interesting sort of trials going on?
Yeah, I've got, if the Innovate UK funding appears, I'm part of a project looking at Azotica.
All right, yes, that one.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I'll be continuing with the consortium Bug Boost in the potatoes wall-to-wall, because that's proven itself to be worthwhile. Looking at doing it a little bit better in the sugar beet, because the last field we lifted, half of it was untreated. The first half wasn't particularly well treated, and it is noticeably down on yield and vigour and leaves. That could be a little bit down to soil type. Limestone never seems to quite produce the top cover, which photosynthesis captures sunlight with green leaves, turn it into sugar. Less green leaf, less crop. There's more to that than coincidence, I think. So that's an interesting one to watch. What else have we got going on? I think that's it as the biology side of it. With a strip till demo this back end, the strip till cereals, that's probably a direction we're heading, because of the different land types, taking straw off, putting muck on, quite a varied rotation. Going hardcore direct drilling is fairly seriously high risk when you've got a rent bill to pay. We've not really got the setup to facilitate that, but strip till looks like a fairly happy compromise going by this demo that we just had. If we can start and do that with sugar beet, I have a 9-acre field that's quite kind land currently in the cover crop coming sugar beet. I'm trying not to do any primary cultivating on it. If we can do no secondary cultivating on it as well, that will be better again. If it won't work, if that land type's not kind enough to do it, nowhere else is on this farm anyway.
What sort of cover crop mix have you got on that sugar beet?
It's that was the first out of the bag one that I've ever used. It's an Agravista mix. What the hell is it called? It's focused on nematodes more than anything else.
Well, like a trap crop.
Not so much a trap crop. No, it's more radish. Quite a bit of radish in it. What the hell else is in it? Black oat.
So more of a repellent to root feeders.
Yeah, we're using roots of radish. Let me see if I can find it. Be on this here email somewhere.
Oh right, Doug. I thought you were showing us your kitchen that you need to wash up.
Oh, bloody hell, there's a lot of emails there.
Aren't you supposed to read those?
I'm supposed to read some of them. I can't bloody find it.
I just put one rule into my inbox. Whenever something comes in, I just delete it automatically.
I had 20 odd thousand emails there. I have to start doing the same thing, I think. What the hell have we done here? Are you there? Are you back? It's about five.
Evening, Andy.
I'll have had an email, so invoice, I'm bound to one. Where we did.
Andrew's looking. In the meantime, Adam, you can give us all an update on our winter wheat trial that you saw.
Yeah, so I wrote a letter to Santa to remove all the rape, and he came and removed it all.
The reindeer ate it all.
Yeah, saw the tracks of the reindeer and everything, so it's legit. No, it's very good though. All the rape died. It's all gone, so that's cool. It's a bit patchy where it was, but hopefully
a carrot and a glass of port out for it.
Yeah, absolutely. By the oak tree there, yeah. On a little table I set up for him. You got to be polite and respectful of these people that have to do all this work.
Hardy Mix V3, whatever a V3 means. That was what the seed mix was called. Agravista Hardy Mix. See what Google will tell me.
Be interesting to know how many how many different seeds are in there, different varieties, sorry, are in there.
4 or 5. It's not massive.
Okay.
There we go.
I was listening to I think it was Dr. Johns the other day, and she said there was a farmer that chucked like everything that he accumulated at one point, and he put in like 27 different species onto a field for a cover crop mix. He had the best results basically with productivity afterwards. I'm guessing it would be quite difficult to do that with the cost of the cover crop seeds.
From the Jenna project, there was a minimum of 8 before you can really start to pull down the sufficient nitrogen, or equivalent of the synthetic inputs. So you start from 8 and you build up. Anything less than 8, you just don't get the same impact.
8 different species.
Yep.
Yeah, this is oilseed radish, Ethiopian mustard, and white mustard.
What was that study called?
The first one I've bought.
It's the Jenna, but it was repeated in Canada as well, and I think it was done in England. Someone did it, and I can't remember which research group did it in the UK. But there were three independents, and they all came out with the same thing. You start with your minimum 8 and build from there annually. It doesn't have to be different species, but different varieties.
Right. Normally we would be mustard, radish, vetch, and oats, as it would be a fairly standard cover crop mix I would use pre-80s. the vetch can sometimes become beans on some farms. If the farm doesn't grow beans, then I'll use beans instead of vetch.
And is that going to be terminated before the sugar beet?
Yes. Yeah. The big question is when. With potatoes, it could be end of February or even into March. If I'm gonna, but that's on fairly intensively worked land.
Glenn, didn't you have an example of potatoes where it was just mowed? It wasn't like fully terminated.
Yeah, well, we always terminate before planting potatoes, otherwise it just screws up the drill or the seeder, the automatic seeder. But the way we tend to terminate it about a month before planting, just to let it ret down and then integrate it with you know, power harrow or something. So we're impacting the current account, but no deeper. So we're not impacting the soil organic carbon really.
How deep
and
do
then
you
the trick
cultivate afterwards?
Oh, it's tickling the top. It's just enough to really get the OM, any OM back into the soil, just so that you can get the you know, the self seeders through without wrapping them all up in all the mess.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You must put on some fairly kind soil types of that then.
Yeah, well, we have been building it. So when we started, it was very clay, and it was not clay. It wasn't kind at all. We had to subsoil it, as Daniel knows, with microbes heavily to really break it up. But we only did it once. We've never ploughed it since, and now it's soft enough to push a stick into. You know, go in a good few feet.
Right, superb. Whereabouts in the world is that?
Jersey.
Right.
Trying to get a decent Jersey Royal back into the UK supermarkets. That's what our aim is.
And I guess you have some fairly serious PCM pressure there.
Not in our fields.
Oh, yeah.
In all the surrounding fields, we get it.
Right.
All the chemical fields are really hammered with PCM, but not in our biological one.
Right.
There is the P. You know, when you do the tests, there is PCM, but there's no serious significant damage because it's been you know, there's more there are more predators in the system, so everything goes up equally. It's not something like the predators. The root feeders get hammered. Everything just increases, but it's in proportion.
And how wide a rotation are you running at that then?
Yearly. No, you know, so we're planting annually.
Right, on same land.
Yep.
Right, so presumably you take the potato crop off, plant the cover, and grow on again.
Pretty much, and treat with microbes.
Yeah. That sounds more akin to a Daniel Rocky type approach in Canada. I guess the climate in Jersey is slightly different to what it is in North Yorkshire. But, that's impressive that you've got that tight of rotation, producing a quality crop without the PCM building. That's proper.
Yeah, well, it's what Elaine pushed hard on to start with. You don't need rotations if you've got the biology, because the biology is basically, you know, managing the disease side of things. And from my experience, we've seen it. That is only one field. We're going to this year. We've got an interesting experiment where we're running dairy, potatoes, and hemp. You know, in an annual rotation. So that'll be interesting. See how that impacts it.
Definitely.
Phil has a question there in the chat.
So what sort of strip till drill? We demoed DTS and Missouri. The DTS was very underwhelming, both from the point of view of the machine and the company. The Missouri was absolutely the opposite. Very impressive machine, and very impressed with the approach of the company as well. I've had a price which has made sends you to a dark room for a cry. But I've applied for a grant. We'll see if the grant comes through. We'll seriously consider it. There's potential to save a nice few quid. What put me off the claim, and we have had a contract to do something with the claim in the past, was just lack of contour following, really. For the variation in seeding depth was my concern, really. I didn't that and the the leading leg on the Missouri has a wing on it, whereas the Claydon doesn't. Hope that answers the question. Doug, what's a soil battery? Forgive my ignorance on this.
Sorry, this is just a bit of fun that Richard and I had in the office over Christmas. So we've got 4 cups of soil, and then we're joining them together with zinc and copper strips, and then we've had an LED light running for, well, it's over a week now. No, it's a week tomorrow. We had an LED light powered by this soil battery. And actually, what's really interesting is that today I've noticed for the first time, because it's warm in the office, the surface of the soil's absolutely smothered in fungus.
Right.
Whether it's good fungus or not, I couldn't tell you. I was there's some nice white stuff, and there's looks like some orange stuff that's appearing as well.
Is that a technical term?
It is, certainly in Kent it is, yes. Yeah. But it's interesting. What we're looking to do is to see if we can run, oh, there you go, mobile chicken sheds, run the lights, string LED lights via the soil. And basically it's soil microbiome. Well, we're led to believe it's soil microbiome emitting electrons whilst feeding off a carbohydrate source. Discuss.
Well, I'm having to change my chicken facilities at the present moment, and I did buy some fairly cheap second-hand strip lights from somebody that was packing up. That did strike me as not particularly energy efficient, and I managed to justify it in my own head by thinking, well, during the day at least they're powered by solar. During the day we barely need the bloody things. So if I can power them by just sticking 2 wires out at shed and sticking them in the ground, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think the light. It's fair to say that the LED light is very small and doesn't require an awful lot of electricity. But it's only got, well, I don't know how big the cups are. Probably less than half a litre each, and there's 4 of them.
Right.
Yeah.
I recall such experiments that I found on the interwebs a few years ago, actually. But they had quite a lot of water, and it was more of an anaerobic system that actually produced electricity. So I'm curious whether this is the case of microbes producing it, or have you actually produced a rudimentary battery with some sort of acidity in the soil working with those 2 metals like a lemon or a potato would. So I don't know. I don't have enough information to actually give you that, but just those 2 things that come to my mind when I see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very high organic matter soil. I don't know. We're going to do a lot more experimenting with different soil types, and soils that we can eliminate the we can potentially eliminate the thought process that microbes are doing it by using some fairly rubbish soil we can find next door, which I know won't have a great deal of microbiological life in it.
Phil is asking, is it not essentially a water battery, Dr. Pollock, for phase of water, etc.? Never heard of that.
No, nor have I.
Never heard of that. Sounds beyond my understanding.
It's a quite a difficult book to read, that one, The 4th Phase of Water. But it is interesting. It's basically there's basically not just liquid, gas, and solid water, ice. There's a 4th phase. And then it goes up a higher electron, and then it drops back down again. It doesn't stay there very long. It's a gel, and there's some thinking you can use that 4th phase of water to produce electricity. But whether Phil knows more than I do, but I only got halfway through the book and gave up. But apparently it's got some good potential for batteries, and it is just using water. But I don't know enough about it. Whether Phil does.
It should be a long while before you can power grain dryer on moisture that you took out at grain then.
Well, do you know what? The Nazis has demonstrated, in the 40s that water has got a lot of power to it. If you just put it in a very, very large tank and just skim the very bottom, you just get the deuterium from the very bottom, and you can have a nuclear bomb. So
Cool.
there you go, lots of energy. You could have lots of energy from that water, any water. Anyways, on that tangent.
I wanted to ask you, Daniel, about your goop that you're selling.
Sorry, go ahead. What do you want to know?
Would that be any good for adding to my Johnson Sues to top up the microbes?
Yeah, it would actually. It would just sort of help with the decomposition and establish these guys. Any kind of addition of species that you can think of, healthy species helps. So obviously, we're trying our best to have a good mix. This is news, by the way. Sheffield University has found internal funding, and they're starting this month with trials for us. So we're going to have all the DNA analysis of the stuff that we make, and they're going to do independent greenhouse trials this year. So yes, to answer your question, that stuff basically, you can take like the 200 ml one, dilute it in water and just spray it into the Johnson Sue.
How long before I wanted to use it would you recommend? I know it depends on the weather. If I say I want to use some extract in March, is it best to do it soon? Obviously not with -3 tonight, but
it's probably not -3 in the pile.
No, I know, but
I think Adam has got a few things to say about this.
I was just going to say, anytime the thermophilic phase has stopped, basically.
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, if you add it now, obviously, the longer you leave it, the longer you give those organisms time to grow out. So you should have a greater effect as more time.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have to have a word with you tomorrow or something, Daniel.
Fine. The thing with this thing is it's basically what we think, and again, that's going to be only confirmed with the DNA analysis, is that the fungi that end up in goop in our extracts is the fungi that feeds off metabolites of other fungi, like the fungi that will actually start munching the basic cellulose and lignin in the wood chips, right? And then these guys basically go through their cycle, and then they produce their own metabolites, and then other fungi come in. And so having those guys basically sort of gives you that secondary stage potentially quicker, so that they establish quicker, and hopefully you will have more of them in 3 months time, kind of thing, because they'll be there whilst the primary fungi are decomposing. But again, it's not something that I've got tested. It's mainly from gathered information from the outside that we just sort of have this hypothesis on how this actually is supposed to be working.
And I presume there's more than fungi in there, is there?
Well, in our goop, yeah. The main two things that we measure in the product is fungi and bacterial feeding nematodes.
Yeah.
Because in the filtration process, most of the bacteria and most of the protozoa, they don't end up in the product. So, for instance, we may come up with at some point that we will probably at some point be selling the compost itself with everything. We're trying to find ways to compact protozoa as well. And when we know the actual DNA composition of our compost, then we'll know if it makes sense also to include the bacteria in the whole thing, because there's a lot of work obviously that's already been done on various kinds of beneficial bacteria. So if we have them in compost, it's probably beneficial for us to be sharing those two. But at the moment, it's fungi and nematodes, because your compost, I can remember you've been sending some samples to us as well. So the thing is that most people, on our say compost leaderboard, you already have bacteria and you already have protozoa, right? So we just bump up the stuff that is relatively scarce.
Okay, yeah, no, makes sense to try one in one bioreactor and compare it to one without and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really sort of looking forward to having a good deep dive, with Sheffield in terms of how does that fungal to bacterial ratio really affect different plant groups that we work with. Because I can tell you, we don't have any trials set up here, right? But I've got some plants on the windowsill, and I've been sort of trying to save this basil, and I've injected goop very concentrated goop into the root zone of the basil, and I've also injected concentrated goop into the root zone of this mini apple tree that's growing beside this massive succulent that my wife is growing. And it's sitting there in the roots, not doing anything because basically the succulent is overpowering it, right? So I've done those 2 injections, and the apple is still there. It started producing a flower, whilst the basil, a few hours after the injection, basically started wilting. And so, we don't know really. We know obviously the theory from Dr. Ingham that if you increase the fungal count too high for a specific plant, then obviously it's beyond its succession zone, and it's not going to be happy. And it looks like this is what happened with my basil this time, because I added goop a couple of weeks prior in a very small quantity, and it actually started growing again. But when I injected in quite a lot, that's when it actually started wilting. And so I'm curious, basically, how are we going to control that? And so this is going to be big section of I think of discovery in the next 2 years for us.
So we've got something very similar, but on a field scale. So we've got a field where it was treated organically, but with traditional practices of ploughing and everything else like that. And we've got rampant marching soldier across the actual field. You can see it, the weeds are just everywhere. And there's very bad soil cover. But where we treated the other half of the field regeneratively and inoculated with a very high fungal compost extract, there's none of that weed. And it's exactly the same field, and you can't say, well, the seed couldn't have got into the other part of the field because it's right next to each other. So there is definitely something in it where you can actually shift the successions up depending on the fungal. But what's really interesting is in between where the the bent grasses come in. So you're talking about the really problem grasses in the fields which overtake everything and suffocate the seeds or prevent the seeds from growing. That's where we're at the moment, is how to terminate that grass without using chemical or too much mechanical termination without damaging the fungal. And that's where it's going to get really interesting, because at the moment the grass is just killing everything else when we try and plant into it.
You tried buckwheat as a cover crop?
Yeah, we've on that one we haven't done the buckwheat. We're putting buckwheat in. It is part of the cover crop this year, but we had a very, very dense cereal rye vetch mix with some brassicas in it last year. We crimper rolled it in to get the carbon, and then inoculated so that the fungi could break down the carbon. And it worked incredibly well. It literally shifted the succession within months from, I think it was about 0.35 when we measured it. By the end of the year, we were up to 0.75 fungal bacteria ratio, just on the half that we'd crimper rolled. But now we've got lots and lots of grass to deal with, and that's going to be the challenge. So, and we've had a very mild winter, so the grass is going nuts.
That's the thing with this. It's something that's been in the back of my head for a long time. There are plants which could be considered weeds that basically could be potentially in the same successional bracket as the crop that we're trying to grow. And so it's not going to be enough just basically to have the fungal to bacterial ratio right. It's going to be something else as well to want to ensure that these things don't interfere with the crop. And whether they actually interfere completely, they actually suffocate the crop or just, grow beside it, I'm not an expert in that. it's only experiments that would be able to tell. There's a question from Yarmid. There's an article apparently in Farmers Weekly suggesting that anaerobic compost using bokashi is much better than the Ingham aerobic version. Any thoughts? And the question about what does better mean? Much more efficient, low carbon losses, high nitrogen, faster to make. Hang on, I'll find the link. Thank you. There is a difference between bokashi, obviously, and composting. What are they using? I'm just going to open this thing. I'm going to share my screen actually.
Bokashi is also a word that seems to be used for lots of different processes.
EM1, I think they're using. I read it flat out ago.
Right. Is it truly anaerobic in a vessel, or is it?
They're treating it like silage. They're treating waste. There you go. It's inside. Trying to improve the use of their manures.
The big Swiss roll.
Yeah.
I would say that it's going to be different, and that they're both going to be useful tools.
Yeah, I always say that it's different. The thing about this thing, for instance, you know, the bokashi, if what we're trying to do, we're trying to grow microbes. They're trying to preserve nutrients. You know, there's composting also preserves nutrients. So you know, it depends how you treat it, but we're trying to grow out microbes that not just preserve nutrients, but actually do a role in the soil. And you're not going to get that with bokashi. Bokashi is just basically some bacteria, and usually a small number of species. And yeast, there you go. So yeah, that's the one.
So my experience with the bokashi side of things is because the organic matter has been broken down anaerobically, the microbes aren't actually having to use energy to break it down when it's applied to the soils. And so the plants can just access all the humics. And this is what makes it work. But you're quite right, it doesn't actually drive the succession of the soils in the right direction, because you know you haven't got the beneficials there to actually continue. Still need to apply the beneficials. It'll only take you to a certain level, but no further.
Yeah, it's a good you know, circular economy tool, just like any other. Basically, you know, it's just like taking, you know, you could also, you know, look at basically taking I don't know, cow shit bedding and, you know, spreading that out. You know, that also is returning nutrients. So cool.
Well, if we have time, I have a quick question for everyone. So I'm looking into mineralization tanks that are used in aquaponics to deal with fish excrement. They basically, when the excrement builds up, they move it into a separate decoupled tank, and then they aerate it for a month to up to 4 months sometimes. And this allows for mineralization of the fish shit, right? So making ionic forms of nutrients. So I'm going to start to experiment with this for basically just producing ionic forms of nutrients. And I wanted to know chronic deficiencies that are common in agricultural land. Obviously, I'm not a farmer, so I don't really know these things. Issues that crop up a lot, expensive things that you feel like you need to buy, like, and yeah, are expensive. This is all in order to try and, you know, convert people to organic to a biological system in a year without losses. So I'm thinking maybe there's going to be cases where chronic deficiencies are a problem, even with the implementation of microbes within the first year. So if you've got any feedback on that, that would be useful.
It depends. Deficiency is often sort of a cloudy word of availability. You know, there's a farm where we grow potatoes where the phosphate index of a 6.5 is causing lockup of micronutrients that you then have to feed through the leaf because they're not available in the soil. Nearly every soil test I do will be short sulfur. Most of them will be short of manganese. We don't suffer too badly from it, but there are areas around here that have an excess of magnesium, which causes similar lockup issues. where our magnesium is round about the 2, so it's about as ideal as it gets, really. We're quite lucky in that regard. Some farms, the availability could be better but for a higher pH, and they're quite difficult ones to work with. What else do we see? Shortage. Sometimes see a shortage in molybdenum, but it's not really a problem to most of the crops that we grow. Sulfur and manganese would be the two that you're always, you get a soil test back, it's always in red.
And then Phil said, struggling historically with manganese. This was mostly in conventional system building. Biology may help this, I hope. The Armid says boron, molybdenum, and manganese. The Armid, do you mean manganese deficiency or actually excess as well? And then Judith says cobalt, selenium, and copper. Well, these are deficient for livestock, yes, but I don't know if these elements are present in the soil whilst there's not. Do you know what? I think I saw a thing about selenium, and I think there was like one soil somewhere in Australia that it's basically very low in the total pool of selenium, but all of the other ones are absolutely fine. So it's just a matter of finding the right species of microbes that can actually mine this for you. So the one thing,
less talking about mining it from the parent material and more talking about producing it in water and then trying to carry it into the plant tissue with fulvic acid.
And this is interesting because there's mechanisms for that as well. Probably, I'm always thinking of microbes. Adam has got some other magical solutions, and the thing that comes to my mind actually with what Adam's suggesting, there's like these plant mineral accumulators, and there's different plants that can accumulate different minerals. Potentially if there's things like this, then for instance, somebody could grow a crop of a particular plant accumulator that could be actually mining the soil with, they never do it alone. They always do it with microbes. But basically then you could put that into a tank like Adam's suggesting and get that nutrient. So there you go. That's something as a development. I'm also interested obviously in producing our own mycorrhizal fungi, and they deal quite a lot with phosphorus and sulfur. And I've also seen a paper where they manage the manganese as well. And so there is mycorrhizal fungi. If they establish properly, they can manage the excess magnesium. Sorry. So I've seen a paper on that somewhere. I won't be able to dig it out straight away, but I've seen a paper on that.
We don't have high levels of calcium, and since we started using polysulfate with a bit of calcium in it.
Well, calcium again is very good for fungi. So if you were to take some of our goop, they would be very happy with that because they basically sequester all the calcium. And this is something that we've actually seen.
I think it's an underrated nutrient. The one that concerns me the most, the element that concerns me a bit, is potash, because that's primarily what we're taking off when we harvest a crop. And if we aren't applying any levels are going to drop. We're probably applying a bit more than we could get away with. And sometimes you're doing that in better years so that you can cut back a bit in years where you can't afford to put the damn stuff on.
I've seen an Indian producer that is actually making potassium solubilizers and bacteria, so it's not something that I've seen available in the UK yet, and it's something that I'd be interested, when I get my investment and I, get some more resources, I want to actually get more into that side of things as well, because that could be a thing that unlocks your potassium in the soil that you already have got in the soil. And then, you combine that with the nutrient cyclers that we already have, and, then we should be able to do that. Ingham uses sparks to state that the correct biology will mine every mineral you ever need in the same piece of soil. And that's the idea. Yeah, the Armid, again, he's writing in the chat. There is, like a massive basic soil science manual kind of thing 650 pages or something silly like that. And the idea is that that all soils have got all of the nutrients, but they're basically just locked up. They're in the total pool. And so this is why I'm so keen on having all of the relevant microbes in the mix and actually working with the crop. So, the sort of questions that still remain in my head, for instance, is based on the DNA analysis, have we got all of the species that at least science knows about beyond the stuff that we don't know about? Because I'm just interested, And then Glyn writes, we use SAP analysis. And that's the thing, I would like to basically do the same thing. I would like to have SAP analysis connected to chemical composition, connected to DNA analysis. And that will give us, the full picture. So that's the sort of stuff that I'd like to see. Adam?
Yeah, it's all good stuff. This all comes from aquaponics. A guy in Vietnam has taken the whole mineralization tank idea, and he's tried it with a few different things. So he took banana trunk from banana agriculture, he chipped it, and he put it into a mineralization tank for up to 3 months. And in those 3 months, he achieved 35 grams of ionic potassium per liter in that solution. So this is really useful for aquaponics. He's also done it with eggshells, which gives him calcium and iron. Again, iron is really useful in aquaponics. So this is just I'm trying to get an idea to inform my experimentation, because obviously we don't have access to SAP analysis yet, but in the future, hopefully we will do. And I'd like to start the experimentation now. So I have lots of ideas, but we'll see how it goes, and we'll get back to you.
That's why Adam is the bioinoculum engineer in this company. He runs the show with all these things. Cool. Anything else before we wrap up today?
No, think so. Thank you.
Good. Sounds like a good discussion today. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good start of the year.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Awesome. If you make it for tomorrow for Oxford Real Farming Conference, that'll be great. If not, I'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
All right. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.